Aloha and welcome to this experience of Meteor-Mongo. And unlike a lot of my experiences, this is not a practice WOD in the sense that I'm not going to ask you to try to solve this or go through this set of tasks by yourself first before you watch this video. In a practice WOD scenario, I usually give you some readings that you can look at first, and then the practice WOD is your attempt to actually apply the readings or the learnings from those readings. And thus, I think the learning experience is enhanced by trying it yourself before watching the video. In this case, there aren't really any pre-existing readings I could find that provide this material. And so to me, it doesn't make sense in this specific case for you to kind of blunder around trying to execute this before I've had a chance to kind of talk you through it and explain how things work. So in this case, this isn't a practice WOD. It is an important experience for you to go through, but you can watch this video first and then try it yourself. So what we're going to do is start off and we're going to make a GitHub repo called Meteor-Mongo-Practice. So I can go to GitHub, I can say new, and then I can type in Meteor-Mongo-Practice. And for grins, I'll make it private. No, yeah. And then I'll initialize with a README, create the repo. You can make it private, public, doesn't really matter. And then I'll open it in the desktop, and I'll put it in my directory, Meteor-Mongo-Practice. And so now we've got that done. And we're going to cd into the directory. So let me bring up a terminal. So cd GitHub Philip M. Johnson Meteor-Mongo-Practice, and then Meteor create Meteor-Mongo-Practice. Okay, so that takes about 10 seconds, and if it's taking a lot longer than that, then you probably want to work with your environment and make sure that you can create Meteor applications in a small amount of time. Okay, so now we've got this internal directory called Meteor-Mongo-Practice, and we're going to rename it to app. Okay. And then we're going to go to localhost. Oh, then we got to do we got to cd into it, and just update this I think a little bit. We're gonna cd into the app directory and invoke Meteor run. So cd app Meteor run. And again, to give you some timing, doing a Meteor run. Takes a little while with Meteor, so 36. It's about 20 seconds it took me to get that going. And if it's taking a lot longer than that, then again, you want to start thinking about what's going on. The good news about Meteor is that even if this startup time can be kind of a while, but once you're doing development and you're saving code, it can do a restart fairly quickly and refresh the page and show you your changes. So in terms of an entire development session, you pay that cost of bringing up Meteor the first time, but then as you move on, the refreshing process is generally pretty quick. Okay, so we've got our little simple, default Meteor app running, which is what we wanted to do. And now we're going to create a IntelliJ project. So let me say new project, and then static web, and we're going to find Meteor-Mongo-Practice. We'll call it that, and we'll do finish. And then Unfortunately, there we go. Just dragging it from my other monitor into this screen. And one of the things you'll see is that IntelliJ needs to, the first time it sees a project, again, there are these one-time overheads when you bring things up of indexing. So you can see this little bar down here. Again, I'll time it for you so you get a sense for how long it takes. It's got to go through all the NPM modules and figure out the entire contents of the project. And again, after you've done this once, when you first create the project, the indexing runs generally very fast. You barely notice it. And you get all sorts of benefits from the indexing because now it understands the complete structure of your application and can give you lots of help. So again, you want to create a development environment which may take a little bit of extra time when you're first setting up a project to kind of parse and understand the contents, but then an appropriate development environment will pay that off in spades. Okay, so that little promo being done, you can see we've now got our initial Meteor project, got an app directory, we've got node modules, which contains the core stuff for Meteor, and that's what was why the indexing was taking so long, because there's a fair amount of stuff in there. Okay, so let's go back to our instructions. So we've got our IntelliJ project. We haven't got ESLint to fail yet, but we could if we went, say, into a server. Let's see what happens. Okay, we'll just say remember don't. So it's going to add these things to Git as it finds them, and that's fine for this. So we have an ESLint failure. We will definitely be using ESLint later on, but for this first week with Mongo, I'm trying to, I'm not concentrating on code style, essentially, for this first week. I'm trying to help you just concentrate on, like, what the heck is Meteor, what the heck is Mongo. So I don't want to provide more overhead. So we're going to disable ESLint for just this week, and that's how you do that, and then the message goes away. But don't fear if you're worried, because we will definitely be using ESLint for our Meteor development once we're actually doing it. Okay, so we've disabled ESLint for this project. And the next thing that's really useful is in your Chrome environment, there is this thing called Meteor DevTools, and I'll click here. And what you'll see is I've already added it to my Chrome, okay? But you can click on it, it will say add to Chrome, and you should add it to Chrome, and it's very cool because it provides all sorts of nice features for understanding the state of your Meteor client, right? The Meteor client is the one that runs in the browser. The Meteor server is this guy right here that's running in a shell command or in a process on your laptop, okay? But anyway, you want to add this Meteor DevTools to your Chrome environment, and as you'll see in this experience, we're going to use it to kind of understand what's going on the client side with respect to Mongo, as well as as opposed to what's going on the server side. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. So I've installed this already. You can install it now. And then the next thing we're going to do is the goal of this is remember in our last experience, we created a simple people collection. And so what we're going to do, and we inspected it with the MongoDB shell on the server side, inside that little command shell. Now what we're going to do is we're going to replicate it, but this time we're going to create the collection the way you would when you're using Meteor, which is you're going to write JavaScript code as part of your Meteor application that creates the collection. And the syntax of how you do this is slightly different from what you do in the shell. So I wanted to illustrate that, but we're basically going to go through the same, kind of create the same stuff we did in the prior experience. And what I'm going to do that is to start off by, in the app directory, creating a directory called both, so that we'll have a client server in both directory. So here you can see we have the .meteor directory, which is just Meteor stuff we don't care about. Node modules, that's stuff that's installed by Node, we don't care about that. And that leaves basically a client directory and a server directory, which we care about. client directory is stuff that Meteor will only load on the client side. The server directory is stuff that Meteor will only load on the server side. And then, more or less, everything else would be loaded on both sides. Okay, both within the server, which is this, again, this command shell process, the client being the browser, right? Like right here. Okay, that's the client. So Meteor has this idea of JavaScript runs everywhere. It's all JavaScript. So Meteor needs help, needs your help in knowing what code do you want to have only running in the server, what code do you want to have only running in the client, and what code do you want to have running in both environments. Okay, and it turns out we're going to want some code that runs in both environments. And we don't have to do this. We could actually create this file at top level, but I think it makes it much easier to understand if we create a new directory called both, so that now we have a both directory, a client, and a server directory, and that kind of makes it clear what our intentions are for each kind of code. And so let me go back to, I'm going to go here. So I've created my both directory, and we're going to create inside the both directory a file called peoplecollection.js, and we're going to put that stuff inside it. So first I have to create peoplecollection.js. So I'll do propeller n file peoplecollection.js, and then inside that I'm just going to copy and paste this code, which will hopefully work. And I'll save that out. And so what this means is that on both the client side and the server side, we have defined a collection called people, and we bound the variable people lowercase to the instance of that collection, and we're exporting it, which means that other code, by importing this peoplecollection.js, can get access to that variable, which is bound to this particular object. And Mongo is a pre-existing thing, so we have to import that from the Meteor-Mongo package. Okay, so the import statement makes Mongo available in this next line of code. The export creates this people collection, as I said before, binds it to the variable people. Okay, and then to learn more about the Mongo.collection function, which is a good idea, you can go here and read about it. All right, but for right now, this is basically all you need to know. Now what we want to do is we want to add some documents to this collection, and so I'll go onto the server side. I'm going to create something called peopleinitialization.js. So let me go here, and in the server directory, I'll do propeller n, file peopleinitialization.js, and then inside that, I'll put this code. Okay, and then I'll save that, and then again, you can see we've imported our people variable from the peoplecollection.js file, which means now people is a variable that's bound to an instance of this MongoDB collection, which means we can call the insert method on this object that's bound to people, and we can pass it an object which is going to be which is going to represent the object, the document that's going to be created inside Mongo. Okay, and then if you want to read more about that, here's the documentation inside Meteor on collections. This is the insert method that you call on an instance of a Mongo collection, which is what the people thing is bound to. Okay. Okay. Whoops. All right. So let's go back and see what we're supposed to. Okay. So now that we've done this, we want to inspect the server-side and the client-side MongoDB databases. So to look at the server-side MongoDB database, what we've got to do is we've got to create a new shell while the current one is running, cd back into our app directory, and type Meteor-Mongo. Okay, so let's bring up the shell, and you can see this thing's being restarted. I can do a propeller T on a Mac to create a second command shell. So there's my first one. Here's my second one. And then I can cd to GitHub Philip M. Johnson Meteor-Mongo-Practice app. And then I can say Meteor-Mongo. And now this is going to bring up access to that MongoDB process that's running and is connected to our running Meteor process, right? So this is the server side, you know, and we've got a Meteor process running, and we've got a Mongo process running, which is our database, and the two are talking to each other. And this is a command that gives us access to that underlying Mongo process. So we can say show collections. Okay, and what we can see is we've got a people collection, which is what we expect. And then we can say, if we want to look at the contents of that, we can say db.people.find. And what you can see is we've got our documents. And they look almost exactly like the JavaScript objects that we passed into the insert command with the addition of a unique ID. Okay, and if you remember from the previous experience, when we were just using the shell and creating documents inside the shell, this ID, the object as part of this ID, was a more complicated looking thing. And in fact, this ID field can be, I think, anything that's unique, and Meteor kind of overrides the default mechanism to use these. I think they're like 14 character strings, something like that. But anyway, you know, they're a unique ID. Okay, and we've got our 4 folks in there. Okay, so now, just a bit like before, we now see on the server side, by looking at our shell, what what documents are in the people database. But what's new is now we're going to go back to MeteorMongoPractice. We're going to bring up Chrome Developer Tools, and we've got this new little guy here, Meteor. That's a result of loading that tab. And if we click on that Meteor, we get this stuff. And the one that we're interested in right now is MiniMongo. So let me make this a little higher. And then if I click on people, what you can see is we can now see the documents in the people collection that's on the client side. And this is going to turn out to be exactly like the same stuff is on the server side. Okay, so first of all, note that this is a really nice little plugin to Chrome Developer Tools. You can imagine how much easier your life is going to be during development now that you have access to this thing to say, well, what the heck does the database look like inside my browser? Because when you write your user interface, right, the user interface is always accessing this version of the database. Okay, and so it's super helpful to be able to kind of see what's going on there. Okay, so here's what you should see. Same thing that, essentially the same thing we see on the server side. Okay, and so now, as I talked about before, each time we saved out the files, you remember we added those 2 new files and we copied and pasted some stuff into it, and then I pressed Propeller S to save it. As soon as those files were saved, the Mongo process is monitoring the source code, and each time it notices that a source code file has been updated, it restarts the system with the new, and it kind of refreshes things with that new version of the files. So that's what all these Meteor server restarts mean. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this piece of code, and then we're going to go back to this thing, and we're going to just add it in. And then I'm going to save out the file, and if I get over here quickly enough, we'll see Meteor restarted again. Maybe I missed it. Let me see okay, there you see. It happened so fast that I just added a space and saved and tried to get back here quickly enough so you could see this Meteor server restarted things. Okay, so what is interesting, and I actually saved it out twice, so this is going to be a little different from what you expect. But now we've got 14 people. Okay, how could that be? And that could be because it's a little different. So in my instructions I say there's 9, but I'm assuming you only saved the system, you restarted once, but we restarted twice. Okay, so let's think about why we have so many documents. The reason why is because when we run this code every time the system restarts. So the very first time we started with this, we added 4, okay, documents. Then I put that people insert command in, and we restarted, so we reran it. So now we inserted 5 more documents, including duplicates of the first 4, plus this Doris Johnson. Then I typed the space and restarted yet again. That adds 5 more documents again. So now we're going to have 3 copies of Philip Johnson, 3 copies of Joanne, 3 copies of Jenna, 3 copies of Katie, and 2 copies of Doris, which adds up to 14. Okay, so just to show that, if I go back here, you can see Katie, Philip, Jenna, Katie, Philip, Joanne, Jenna, Joanne. It's in an order by, I guess, the ID or something. Doris, Philip, Joanne, Jenna, Katie, and Doris. So we've got 3 copies of Philip, Joanne, Jenna, and Katie, and 2 copies of Doris, which corresponds to the 2 times we refreshed after we added the Doris. Okay, so that's a little complicated, but the point is each time you restart, if you've just, it's going to reload all the files, and if you've just got these lines inserting, documents, you're going to get duplicate values, right? Because you're reloading that file, so the insert command executes again and again and again, and that's, kind of clearly not what you want. So what we're going to do to fix this is a common issue, right, with this restart, is that you don't necessarily want to, some code you only want to run the first time or under certain conditions. So how could we do this? Okay, so the way we're going to do it is basically replace our people initialization code with this. Okay, and all I've done here, I'll save this out, all I've done here is to say, look, I only want to run these insert commands in the event that there are no documents in the people collection, right? So that makes sense. This is initialization code. If there's nothing in the collection, then I'll do the insert. If I find anybody in the collection, then I won't do it. And if we go back here, I'll just note that I show you pointers. I'm trying to get you familiar with this section because it's useful. Here's the documentation on the find command, and here's documentation on the count command, which is down here. It's really, pretty straightforward. Okay. Now the problem is, of course, we've already kind of corrupted our database, right? We've already got 14 things in there, including 3 duplicates. So somehow we want to get our database back to 0 so we can start over and have things work right. And to do that, we're going to use this command called Meteor-Reset. Okay, so and it's designed exactly for this purpose. So I'll do a Control-C, and then I'll do a Meteor-Reset. Okay, and then I'll do a Meteor-Run. And with any luck, you'll see this weird thing that's currently happening in Meteor. Or maybe not. I don't know. It was happening to me yesterday. Okay, good. So it ran, and what I want, and this is a bug in Meteor, which I'll talk about, and I talk about in the assignment. But basically, when it comes up under certain conditions, you get this error, and then what happens is it exits with a code 1, and Meteor automatically restarts itself, and this time everything's okay. Okay. And if I go back to my documentation, I'll just show you this Meteor bug alert is that there is this bug in Meteor, which you can click on this issue to learn all about it, which will go away. It's a race condition. It's kind of, I hate it when I see Meteor have a bug that you guys are exposed to. But in this case, it's basically not a big deal because Meteor kind of fixes itself. And if we go to MeteorMongo-Practice and refresh to get the current state, what you can see is everything's running fine, and in fact our people collection now has just the 5 records that we want. And if we go here and we could do anything, let's actually just like duplicate this line. What the heck? We can put that in here, and then we can see that we're restarting. Okay, and then we can go back to here, and you can notice that we still only have our 4 elements. In fact, we could refresh the page, and we still have 5 elements. We still have exactly the 5 elements that we want, because now our code is checking to make sure that there's nobody in the database before we do any of these inserts. So I'm going to propeller delete to get rid of that line because it's wrong, and of course that will also trigger yet another restart, but of course it won't make any difference to us up here. Okay, so there you go. Last thing we want you to do is commit your code to GitHub. So I can go here and I can see all this stuff, and I can say initial commit, commit and sync master. In your Git thing, you may have to push, commit locally and then push origin master kind of thing to get it up to GitHub. However you like to do it, you got to get your code up to GitHub, so that if we go to GitHub, okay, which I can do this way, you'll see we have our app in there with our client server both, and so forth. Okay, so again, got to learn efficient ways to do the housekeeping of keeping your code in sync both locally and globally. This is going to be really important when you're working in a team setting and multiple people are working on the same code base at the same time. I'm trying to help you get fast at this while you're only working individually, so that in a few weeks when we become teams, you'll be working much more effectively. Okay, so there it is. The summary of it is that now I'm hoping you have a good sense for how Meteor and Mongo work together. You understand that there's this notion of a client version of MongoDB, which you can see over by using the MeteorMongo command. There's also another instance of Mongo that runs in the browser, or on the client as they say, and the best way to look at that is by installing this Meteor plugin to Chrome Developer Tools, which allows you to kind of inspect the MiniMongo database, which is what Mongo on the client is called, and then you can look at collections and easily see what's inside them, and so forth. And then finally, when you make mistakes, which we all do, you can quit the Meteor process, run Meteor reset to get everything back to square one, and then rerun Meteor to start over again. All right, hope that was helpful. Thanks a lot.